My husband's sister dumped her kids at my clinic at 2 a.m. with trash bags, said, "They're yours now." Then vanished for 2 years while I raised them alone. Got custody. Then she came back drunk, claimed she was pregnant, and said the baby was my husband's. I stood there for a second, staring at the kids, trying to process what Kendra had just done. She dropped them off and just left, like it was nothing. "Alan, I'm really sorry to bother you," she'd said, looking at the three of them, Ben, Emma, and Chloe, huddled together in the cold light of the clinic. She'd handed me a temporary guardianship letter she'd downloaded from some website and just turned around and left. I blinked. What the hell is this? I thought, scanning the paper. But I couldn't even ask her because, in that split second, she was already gone. I set the paper down on the counter. I wanted to call her, ask her what the hell she was thinking, but my phone was already buzzing in my pocket. It was Marcus. I stepped out into the back room, where the sounds of the kids trying to comfort each other filtered in from the front. "Hey, baby," I answered, trying to make my voice sound normal. "How's Australia?" I heard the sound of the wind, the faint hum of a plane, and then his voice, distracted but still warm. "It's fine. It's a lot. But hey, I miss you. What's up?" I rubbed the back of my neck. "You won't believe this shit. Kendra dropped the kids off tonight. No warning. No heads up. Just here you go." There was a pause. A long one. I could practically hear him processing it. "What do you mean dropped off? Did she say anything?" I leaned against the counter, the weight of the situation starting to settle in. "No. She handed me some paperwork and left. No explanation. Nothing." He let out a sharp breath. "God, do you need me to come home early?" I could hear the genuine concern in his voice, but also the helplessness. He couldn't, and we both knew it. "I don't know. My voice faltered. "I'm not sure what to do with them. I called the cops, but they told me to call child services tomorrow. They're just here." I heard the soft clink of a drink in the background on his end, then a sigh. "This is all kinds of fucked up. I'm sorry, Alan." "Yeah." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Me too. I wish I could be there," he said quietly, and I could hear the guilt hanging between us, thick and palpable. "Is there any way?" "No." I cut him off, trying not to sound too harsh. "It's fine. I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out." I turned my head back toward the front, where the kids were still sitting. Ben was clutching his stuffed bear like it was his lifeline. Emma was staring at the floor, her arms crossed, and Chloe was looking up at me with wide eyes, waiting for something I didn't have. "I've got to go," I said, cutting the conversation short. "We'll talk tomorrow." Okay. "I love you," he said quickly. "Love you too." I hung up and stared at the kids. Ben looked up first, his face pale and full of anxiety. "Are we going to be okay here?" he asked softly, like he was asking for permission to breathe. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "You'll be okay." But I wasn't so sure. I grabbed the guardianship letter again, reading through the jumbled mess of legalese. It was clearly a generic template, nothing that looked remotely legitimate. I could already feel the pit in my stomach deepening. But I wasn't going to let them see that. Not yet. I folded the paper and slipped it into a drawer. "All right, let's get you guys settled," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll figure this out in the morning, but right now, you're staying here with me." Ben didn't respond, but he nodded, his lips tight. Emma shifted her gaze toward the door, avoiding eye contact. Chloe, though, was the one who broke the silence. "Where's my mommy?" she asked, her voice small, barely above a whisper. I froze, unsure how to answer her. Kendra had just vanished without a word, and I had nothing to give her but a half-hearted promise of a stable roof over her head. I knelt down to her level, fighting the lump in my throat. "Your mommy is," my voice cracked, and I cleared my throat. "She's not here right now, but I'm here, and you're safe with me." She looked at me for a long moment. Then her face crumpled, and she burst into tears. I wasn't prepared for that. Ben moved in first, putting a hand on her shoulder, and Emma followed, wrapping her arms around Chloe. I stood there, helpless for a second, watching as they comforted each other in the way kids do, before I finally let myself breathe again. They didn't know what had happened, not really. They didn't know the mess that Kendra had just dropped into my lap without even looking back. I ran a hand through my hair and turned to the small fridge in the back room, pulling out a bottle of water. I needed to keep my head clear. I couldn't lose it. Not now. When I turned back, the The kids were still huddled together, but Chloe had stopped crying. Her wide eyes were focused on me, expectantly. I wasn't sure what she saw when she looked at me, but I knew one thing. I couldn't let them down. Not now. We'll get through this, okay? I said, my voice a little steadier now. I know things are tough, but I'm not going anywhere. Ben nodded, and even Emma looked up at me then, giving me the faintest hint of a smile. I couldn't give them answers. Not yet. But I could give them this. I could give them stability. For tonight, that was enough. I set the water bottle down, feeling the weight of everything settling into my bones. The kids were quiet now, huddled on the couch, each of them lost in their own world. Ben was staring at his phone. Emma was drawing on a piece of scrap paper she must have found somewhere, and Chloe, still looking a little lost, was clutching a stuffed rabbit like it was her last tie to the life she knew. I took a breath, then another. The quiet in the room felt like it was pressing down on me, and I needed to do something, anything, to break it. Hey, Ben, I said, trying to keep my voice light. How about you show me how good you are at that game you're playing? He glanced up briefly, his eyes wary, but then he nodded, shoving the phone into my hand like he was offering me a lifeline. It's not really much of a game, he muttered, clearly more comfortable avoiding eye contact than looking me in the face. Just a shooting thing. I smirked, trying to push through the awkwardness. All right, I'm game. Show me how it's done. He reluctantly scooted closer to me and started explaining the game mechanics in that detached, I'm just here to get through this, way kids do when they're holding it together, but not by much. As we played, I could tell he wasn't really invested in the game anymore. His eyes kept flicking over to the hallway, to the door, like he was waiting for someone to come through. Like he was waiting for Kendra. When the game ended with my character getting killed off in about 10 seconds, I sighed. Well, that went well. Ben didn't laugh, just handed the phone back to me like it was a chore. It's fine, he muttered. Yeah, I said, setting the phone down and raking my hand through my hair. Hey, listen, you know you can talk to me, right? He glanced at me, his jaw tight, and for a split second, I thought he might actually say something. Then he just shook his head, grabbed the remote, and flipped on the TV like it was the safest option. I let the silence stretch between us for a while, but I couldn't keep up the act anymore. Look, I know it's not easy. Kendra just dropped you here, and I can't imagine what the hell she was thinking. But I stopped myself, realizing that I was saying too much. He didn't want to hear my reasons or my confusion. Not now, not with everything happening too fast. Do you want to talk about it? I asked, my voice softer now. About what's going on with your mom. He didn't look at me this time, just shifted uncomfortably in his seat. It's fine. I wanted to scream. This was far from fine. But I didn't. I just nodded. Okay. That's when Chloe's voice broke through the thick tension in the room. Are we going to school tomorrow? Her question was so simple, so innocent, that it hit me harder than anything else in the last hour. I turned to look at her, expecting to see more tears, maybe more confusion in her wide, innocent eyes. But instead, she was just waiting for an answer, like this was her new reality, and she was taking it in stride. I don't know, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. We'll figure that out in the morning. Her little face scrunched up. But I want to go to school. I swallowed hard. You don't have to decide right now, Chloe. We'll get you all set up. Everything's going to be okay. She nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She didn't believe me. Not yet, anyway. I wanted to believe my own words, but I knew better than that. I didn't have answers. I didn't even know where to start with any of this. The kids weren't just suddenly going to bounce back. They were broken, quiet, scared versions of the kids I had known for the last few months. I went back to the couch, sitting down next to Chloe and pulling her in close, the way I would with a child that wasn't my own. I could feel her small body tense for a moment before she relaxed into me, her head resting on my shoulder. For a second, I thought I could protect her, protect all of them. But then the doubt crept in again. I couldn't fix what Kendra had done. Ben looked up from the TV, his face unreadable. What's going to happen now? I forced a smile, but it felt like paper over a wound. We take it day by day. Yeah. His voice was quieter than before, but there was a sense of challenge to it. He wasn't asking to know. He was asking to see if I had the answer. I nodded, but it didn't feel like enough. Not even close. Yeah. I said again, trying to convince myself more than him. Emma hadn't said much since we got here, but now she shifted slightly in her seat, catching my eye. For the first time, She didn't look like she was about to disappear into the walls. She wasn't lost in the paper she'd been scribbling on earlier, and her eyes weren't darting around in that anxious way she had when she didn't feel safe. She was looking at me, waiting. Maybe waiting for something to change, something to make sense of all this. "Do you know when Mom's coming back?" she asked, and I heard the small edge of hope in her voice. The way kids sometimes hold on to the idea that everything can go back to the way it was if they ask enough times. I shook my head. "No, I don't know." She looked down at the floor again, but I saw the small, sharp drop in her shoulders, like she was bracing for more disappointment. I didn't know how to answer her. The truth was too heavy. "I'll keep you safe," I said instead, pushing the words out even though I didn't fully believe them myself. "I'm here, and you're not alone." Ben looked at me with that same guarded, calculating look he'd been wearing all night. He nodded, but it wasn't a sign of trust. It was more like an acknowledgement that I was saying what I needed to say. "Okay," he said, then turned his attention back to the TV. Chloe was asleep in my arms now, her breathing slow and even. I wasn't sure when that happened, but I didn't have the heart to move her. And as I sat there, I couldn't stop thinking about how badly everything had gone off the rails. Kendra wasn't coming back. Marcus wasn't here. And somehow, I was supposed to be the one who held this all together. But I had no idea how. I stayed on the couch long after Chloe had fallen asleep in my arms, staring at the TV that wasn't even on anymore. The house felt too quiet, and every creak from the walls felt like it was amplifying the chaos in my head. I kept looking over at the kids, each of them so lost in their own worlds, trying to process things in their own way, and I didn't know how to help them. The only sound in the house was Chloe's soft breathing, the occasional rustle of Ben shifting on the couch, and the scribble of Emma's pen against paper. She hadn't spoken much since her question earlier, but I saw the way she kept glancing at me, like she was expecting an answer to something I didn't know. I wanted to give it to her. Anything, really, but I couldn't lie. I didn't have answers. I didn't even know how we were going to get through tomorrow. I glanced at my watch. The kids were exhausted, but I didn't want to move them. I couldn't figure out how to start any kind of conversation with them that would make this feel even close to normal. The sound of my phone vibrating on the counter made me jump. I didn't need to check to know who it was. "Marcus." I ran a hand over my face. He hadn't called much lately, not with the time difference in the research he had to get through. And I didn't expect much more than a quick check-in. But I also knew it would be different tonight. I had to face it sooner or later. I picked up, half expecting to sound normal. "Hey. Hey, Alan." His voice sounded the same as always, calm, steady, but I could hear the concern under it. "How's it going over there?" I took a deep breath. The weight of everything sat like a rock in my chest, and the words caught in my throat. It's been rough." "Tell me what's going on," he pressed gently. "You don't have to do this alone." I hesitated, looking over at the kids, the way they were curled up in their own silent worlds. Chloe was still asleep, but Ben and Emma were wide awake, pretending to ignore the tension in the room. I wanted to believe they were all right, but there was something in their eyes that made me feel like I was already failing them. "I don't know how to handle this," I finally admitted, my voice softer than I intended. "They're just here, Marcus. No explanation. No warning. Kendra's gone, and I don't even know how to talk to them about it. They keep looking at me like I should have the answers." "Alan, you're doing the best you can," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the frustration in mine. "Just take it one step at a time. They'll need you to be strong, even if it feels like you don't have it in you. You're the one they're counting on now. They trust you." The weight of those words sat heavily with me. "I don't know if I can do this, Marcus. I don't know if I'm what they need right now." "Of course you are," he insisted. "You've always been the one they trust. You've already proven that, over and over." I glanced back at the kids again, wondering if he was right, but the truth was, I didn't feel like their protector. I felt like I was just trying to keep my head above water, pretending to know what the hell I was doing. "Thanks, Marcus," I said, even though it felt hollow coming out of my mouth. "But right now, I don't even know where to start." "We'll figure it out," he said, his tone softening. "You don't have to do it all at once. Let me know what you need, okay? And I'll be here." "I know," I said quietly. I just wish I had some kind of idea of what to do next. But everything's a mess." We were both quiet for a long moment, and I could hear the distance between us. It wasn't just the miles, it was the reality of the situation. He couldn't be here. I was alone in this, and no amount of phone calls or well-meaning words would change that. "I'll call you later," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "You're not alone, Alan. I love you." "I love you too," I said, even though I didn't feel it right now. I just needed to hear it. When I hung up, I looked at the kids again. Ben was still staring at the TV, but his mind wasn't on the screen. I could see it in the way his jaw was tight, the way he kept glancing over at Chloe, then at Emma. Emma finally broke the silence. "What now?" I didn't know how to answer her. "We figure it out, one day at a time." She nodded, but I could see that it wasn't enough for her. It wasn't enough for any of us. I stood up and stretched, my body aching from the long hours and the mental exhaustion. "All right, I'll make us something to eat. How does that sound?" "Fine," Ben muttered, still not looking at me. Emma didn't say anything, but I saw her look up from the floor and nod. Chloe, still half asleep, rubbed her eyes and blinked up at me. I forced another smile. "We'll get through this," I said, but even I didn't believe it. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what they needed, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. For them. Because if I didn't, we'd all be stuck in this dark, empty space. So I kept going, day by day. The next morning came too quickly, like the night had been a blur of exhaustion and unanswered questions. I hadn't slept much, but I had no choice but to push through. The kids were still asleep when I got up, so I took a moment to breathe, to let the stillness settle in before the chaos of the day started. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker as it slowly filled the pot with the hot, black liquid that I was counting on to make it through the day. The silence from the other room felt suffocating, even though the kids were there, even though they were just across the hall. There was something about the way everything had shifted overnight. They weren't just my nephew and nieces anymore. They were something else now, 3 kids who had lost everything in an instant, left with me as the only semblance of safety. I needed to figure this out. I couldn't just keep going like this, fumbling through each day without a plan. I took a deep breath, grabbed my phone, and scrolled to the number I knew I needed to call, Child Protective Services. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Hello, this is Jenna from CPS. How can I help you?" "Jenna, it's Alan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I called last night, but I need to talk to you about something more urgent now. My sister dropped off her kids with no warning and no legal documents, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do next." There was a brief pause on the other end. "I see. I'm glad you called. We can help with temporary custody and placement, but I need to set up a home visit and speak with you in person about the situation. Do you have time this morning?" I don't know how much more time I have. The kids are here, and I'm trying to keep it together, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do, I said, my voice cracking. The weight of it hit me again, the sudden responsibility for these 3 children who didn't even have their mother to comfort them. "I understand, Alan. I'm going to prioritize this, okay?" Jenna's voice was calm, firm. "I'll come by this afternoon. I'll bring the necessary paperwork, and we'll go over your options. In the meantime, try to keep everything as stable as possible for the kids. They need structure right now." "Yeah, thanks." We ended the call, and I stood there for a moment, letting the silence close in on me again. There was nothing else to do but wait for her. I took the coffee to the living room, where the kids were slowly waking up. Ben was already sitting up on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Emma was on the floor, her eyes barely open as she stretched. Chloe was sitting next to her, holding her stuffed rabbit tightly, staring at nothing in particular. It broke my heart to see them like this. So small, so lost. "Morning, guys," I said, trying to sound normal, but it felt like my voice didn't belong in the room. Ben didn't look up, just grunted in response. Emma rubbed her eyes and gave me a half-hearted smile. Chloe's face lit up when she saw the coffee mug in my hand. "Can I have some too?" I smiled, even though I didn't feel it. "Not coffee, kiddo, but you can have some juice." I set the mug down on the counter and walked to the kitchen to grab a glass of orange juice. They needed routine, even if I was struggling to establish one. So I kept it simple. I handed the juice to Chloe, and she took it eagerly, slurping it down in one go. "Thanks," she said, her voice small. "You're welcome," I muttered, staring at the floor for a moment. Then I looked at Ben and Emma, who were still sitting there, not saying much. They were waiting for me to do something. To fix it. I wasn't sure how to do that. "I'm going to make breakfast. You want eggs? Or cereal?" I asked, my voice sounding louder than I intended. Emma shrugged, and Ben just nodded, still glued to his phone. It was like they didn't want to make a choice, didn't want to engage with me. I started making scrambled eggs, the sound of the pan heating up filling the space, trying to block out the tension. This wasn't a normal morning. This wasn't how any of us had expected our lives to be. When I set the food down in front of them, Ben muttered, "Thanks," barely looking at me. Emma poked at her eggs, but didn't say anything. Chloe, on the other hand, was still watching me, like she was trying to figure out if I was really here, if I was really going to stick around. I felt that question burn me. "Do you like them?" I asked, gesturing to her plate. She nodded eagerly. "I like them." Her voice was soft, and she kept her eyes on me for just a little too long. It was like she was trying to trust me, even though I knew it wasn't that simple. The rest of breakfast passed in silence, with only the occasional sound of forks scraping against plates and the muffled hum of the TV in the background. No one talked about what had happened the night before, what had happened to their mother. But it was hanging in the air, thick and undeniable. After they finished eating, I grabbed my phone to call the school, to let them know I would be keeping the kids home for the day. They needed space, I knew that much. But I had no idea how long that space would last. I dialed the school's number and waited for someone to pick up. It felt strange, talking to a receptionist like this, explaining that my niece and nephews wouldn't be in today, explaining that their mother had dropped them off and disappeared. The receptionist wasn't fazed by it, of course. It was just another family emergency to her. When I hung up, I looked at the kids again. This was their reality now. Ben was sitting by the window, staring outside. Emma was picking at her nails, and Chloe was still clutching her rabbit, lost in thought. I had no answers, but I had to be strong for them. I had to. Even if I didn't know how to fix any of this, I had to be what they needed. "We'll get through this," I said, even though I wasn't sure if I believed it. Ben glanced at me for a split second, then turned back to the window. Emma didn't respond. But Chloe, she looked at me with those wide eyes again. "You'll take care of us?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, Chloe, I will." But I was lying, and we both knew it. I barely slept again that night. After Chloe's question, I couldn't shake the weight of it. The quiet in the house felt oppressive, and I was left with nothing but my own thoughts, circling back on themselves. The next morning, I got up early, the cold morning light creeping through the blinds. I knew Jenna from CPS was coming soon, and the thought of her walking into this mess made my stomach churn. I started a pot of coffee, and as the smell filled the kitchen, I tried to focus on the tasks in front of me. The kids were still asleep, so I took the time to organize the living room. I wasn't sure why. I guess it was some subconscious way to pretend I had control over something. Ben was the first one up. He wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, and slumped into a chair at the table. "You okay?" I asked, not looking at him as I grabbed a mug from the cabinet. "I guess." His voice was flat, like everything was going through a filter, like he wasn't really here. I didn't press him. "Cereal, eggs, or toast?" He picked at the cereal box, eyes still a little too glazed. "Cereal's fine." I set the bowl in front of him and kept my focus on the eggs I was scrambling, but I could feel his eyes on me. I could feel the weight of it all on both of us, and I wasn't sure what to do next. He had every right to be angry, but I didn't have the answers he wanted. Emma came downstairs not long after, her hair a mess, still in the pajamas she'd worn to bed. I offered her the same choice, and she chose cereal too, without much more than a shrug. They ate in silence, and for a few minutes, I thought maybe I had fooled myself into believing everything could return to normal. But the truth was, this wasn't a normal morning. Nothing was normal anymore. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number I had been avoiding for days now, the legal clinic. I knew I couldn't do this alone. Kendra had vanished, and Marcus was halfway across the world, and I was stuck here with 3 kids who didn't have anyone else. The receptionist answered after the third ring, sounding too cheerful for the circumstances. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" "I need to speak with someone about custody," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I need to know my options for temporary guardianship." There was a pause before she responded. "Certainly. I'll have someone call you right away. Can I get your name and contact info?" I gave it to her, then hung up and leaned against the counter, rubbing the back of my neck. I felt the burn in my muscles, the tightness that came with being pulled in a million directions. I turned back to the kids. Chloe was sitting at the table, now fully awake, her bunny still tucked tightly against her chest. Ben was fiddling with his phone, still disconnected from everything, and Emma was staring into her cereal, poking at it with the spoon. I set my phone down, and the sound of it hitting the table made them all look up, just for a moment. You guys, I know this is a lot. I hated the way the words sounded. They felt too weak, like they didn't mean anything. But I had to say something. But we'll figure this out. Things are going to get better, okay? Ben rolled his eyes, not even hiding it. Yeah, right. Ben, I said, my voice a little firmer. I'm doing the best I can. I'm not asking you to be happy about it. But I'm here, all right? He didn't respond. Instead, he went back to his phone, his shoulders hunched like he wanted to disappear into it. I could feel the frustration bubbling up again, but I pushed it down. All right, breakfast is done, I said, setting the last plate on the table. Eat up. We've got a long day ahead of us. They didn't protest, just picked at their food, their eyes flicking between me and each other. I could see it. The way they were all waiting for something to happen, waiting for Kendra to walk back through the door and make everything right again. I wanted to promise them that would happen, but it wasn't. I stared down at my plate, the weight of it settling heavily in my chest. I wasn't their mother, wasn't even their real guardian. I wasn't sure what the hell I was supposed to be, but I was all they had left. The doorbell rang, and I stood up so quickly I knocked my chair back. I wasn't ready for Jenna to show up. I wasn't ready to face any of it. But there she was, standing on the porch when I opened the door, clipboard in hand, a friendly but professional smile on her face. Hi, Alan. I'm Jenna. Her voice was calm, comforting, but I could tell she was ready to take control of the situation. It wasn't her fault. It was what I needed, but that didn't make it any easier. Hi, I said, stepping aside to let her in. Come on in. She took a step forward, looking past me at the kids still sitting at the table. How are they doing? She asked, her eyes flicking back to mine. Not great, I admitted, stepping back to give her more room to move inside. But I don't know what to do. She nodded like she understood, but she didn't say anything more. Instead, she took a seat at the dining table, setting her clipboard down and pulling out a stack of papers. The familiar weight of bureaucracy filled the room, but I didn't have time to focus on that right now. We'll start with a few questions, Jenna said, glancing at me before looking over at the kids. Is that all right? I nodded. Yeah, sure. The questions came quick, and they felt like they came from someone who had done this 100 times before. How long had Kendra been gone? Did I know where she was? Had she made any arrangements for the kids? What was the custody situation? I answered as best I could, but it felt like every answer opened up another door I didn't want to walk through. There were things I didn't know, things I couldn't know, and it all felt like too much to carry. But I kept pushing forward. For them. When she was done with the questions, Jenna turned to the kids. I'll need to talk to each of you for a bit. Nothing too heavy, just to make sure you're all doing okay. I looked at them, but I could see the hesitation in their eyes. They didn't want to talk about Kendra. They didn't want to talk about their mom. I didn't blame them. I'll be right here, I said, trying to reassure them, even though I wasn't sure how to reassure myself. Jenna motioned for Ben to come first, and as he stood up and walked toward her, I saw the weight of what was happening settle on his shoulders. He wasn't a kid anymore. Not really. Not with all of this hanging over him. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence in the room was deafening. This was happening, and I was powerless to stop it. All I could do was wait for the next step. The minutes dragged on as I waited for Jenna to finish with Ben. Every second felt like it stretched longer than it should have, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow failing him already. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 15 minutes had passed. It felt like hours. I hated not being in control of anything. I could hear muffled voices from the next room, but I couldn't make out the words. It didn't matter. I knew Ben. He wasn't going to open up easily, and I doubted he'd say much to Jenna. He kept his emotions close, even more so now. I turned back to the kids, who were still sitting at the table, the weight of everything hanging between us. Chloe was tracing circles on the table with her fingers, occasionally glancing at me with eyes full of questions. Emma, though, was staring out the window, lost in thought. She hadn't said much this morning, and I wasn't sure if that was good or bad. I needed to keep things together. I knew that much. The door to the room opened, and Ben stepped out, his expression unreadable. He didn't look at me, didn't say anything, just walked past and sat back down at the table. Jenna followed behind him, clipboard in hand, her expression soft but purposeful. He's doing okay, she said, her tone gentle. but it's clear he's struggling with the sudden change. I nodded, even though I already knew that. I can't imagine how he's feeling. None of this is easy, Jenna said, sitting down across from me. It's a lot for all of them, especially so quickly. I didn't respond, just stared at the table, feeling the weight of her words pressing on me. I knew she was right, but it didn't make it easier to hear. She glanced over at the kids before speaking again. I'd like to talk to Emma next. Is that okay? I gave a short nod, already expecting the question. Yeah, sure. Jenna got up and moved toward Emma, who didn't seem to notice her approach at first. She was still staring out the window, her hands folded neatly in front of her. I wasn't sure what was going on in her head, but I could guess. She'd been quiet all morning, barely meeting anyone's eyes. When Jenna sat beside her, Emma finally turned to face her. There was a guarded look in her eyes, the same one I'd seen so many times before. She was trying not to break, trying to hold herself together. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness in her jaw. She was scared, but she wasn't ready to admit it. Not yet. You're Emma, right? Jenna asked gently, her voice low and steady. Emma just nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. I know this is hard, Jenna said, her tone soothing but firm. But I need to ask you a few things. It's just to make sure you're safe and taken care of, okay? Emma didn't respond, but I saw her nod slightly. I wasn't sure if it was a sign of agreement or just the smallest acknowledgement that she was listening. Jenna continued with her questions, and I stayed silent, watching them both. I wanted to jump in, to make sure Emma was okay, to tell Jenna to ease up a little, to not press too hard. But I couldn't. This wasn't about me. It was about Emma and Ben and Chloe. They needed help that I wasn't equipped to give them, and I hated that more than anything. Jenna finished asking her questions after another 15 minutes, and Emma stood up, her eyes still avoiding mine. She walked past me without a word, sitting back down at the table. Jenna stayed where she was, her gaze soft but assessing. She's having a hard time, she said quietly. But she's not as closed off as Ben. She just needs more time. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I could give her the time she needed. Jenna hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking to the kids, then back to me. I'm going to talk to Chloe next. It'll be short, but I need to make sure she feels safe too. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Instead, I just nodded again. Chloe, who had been quiet through the whole process, looked up when Jenna moved toward her. Her wide eyes met mine for a moment, and I gave her a small smile. She didn't smile back, but she didn't look scared either. Jenna knelt down in front of her, her voice soft. Hi, Chloe. How are you feeling? Chloe didn't answer right away. She just stared at Jenna, her little hands still clutching the stuffed rabbit to her chest. But after a few long seconds, she whispered, Okay. Jenna smiled gently. That's good. I just need to ask you a couple of questions, all right? Nothing too big. I just want to make sure you're okay. Chloe nodded, and I could see her relaxing a little. Jenna didn't push her, just asked the questions quietly, with a calmness that seemed to ease some of the tension in the room. When she was done, she stood up and turned to me. She's doing all right. She's still processing everything, but she's not in immediate distress. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Jenna sat down again, her clipboard resting on her lap. I'll file the initial report and set up another visit in a couple of days. In the meantime, I'll make sure the kids are registered for school as soon as possible. I know it's a lot for them right now, but the routine will help. They'll need it. I nodded again, though it felt like the weight of her words had doubled since the last time. What happens next? I asked, needing to hear it even though I was dreading the answer. Next, she said, we'll start the process of temporary custody. You'll have to go to court eventually to formalize it, but for now, you're their temporary guardian. And we'll start working on a more permanent plan if that's what you're willing to consider. I sat there, trying to let her words settle in. The idea of permanent custody felt like a lifetime away. And yet, it was here. It was happening. Jenna paused, watching me closely. Alan, I know this isn't easy, but you're doing the right thing, and we'll be here to guide you through it. I didn't respond, just kept my eyes on the table, the weight of her words settling into my chest. She stood up and grabbed her things. I'll check in with you in a couple of days. If you need anything before then, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks. I muttered, not sure if I meant it or if I was just trying to push through. Jenna left, and the house felt too quiet again. The kids didn't look at me. They didn't say anything. I wasn't sure how to fix this. I wasn't sure if I even could. But I was all they had now, and I had to make it work. The moment Jenna left, the house felt smaller. The air was thick with the heaviness of everything I was supposed to do, everything I was supposed to figure out. The kids were sitting at the table again, not saying much, but I could feel them watching me like they were waiting for some kind of miracle to happen. Like I was going to wave a magic wand and fix all of this. I wasn't even sure how I was supposed to fix myself. I leaned against the counter, looking at the three of them. Ben was staring out the window, his jaw tight, his body stiff. Emma was sitting with her arms crossed, her eyes darting between her brothers, looking like she was trying to make herself invisible. Chloe was playing with her stuffed rabbit again, her little fingers twisting the fabric like she was trying to hold on to something that made sense. I couldn't give them answers, not yet. But I had to say something. "We're gonna get through this," I said, the words coming out like a half-baked promise. I hated the sound of it, but it was all I had. One step at a time. Ben didn't look at me. Emma didn't respond. Chloe, though, glanced up, her eyes still wide with that same quiet uncertainty. I forced another smile, but it felt like it was barely holding on. I couldn't do this alone. "I'm going to call Marcus," I said, pushing myself off the counter. "See if he has any ideas." Ben didn't even flinch. Emma stayed quiet. Chloe looked down at her rabbit again, not bothering to make eye contact. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus, trying to ignore the heaviness in my chest. He picked up after 2 rings, his voice low and tired. "Hey, baby," he said, sounding like he'd been awake for hours already. "How's it going over there?" "Not good," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose. Jenna came by. "I've got temporary custody for now, but I still don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do." There was a long pause on the other end. "You're doing everything you can, Alan. You've got the kids. You're doing the right thing." I let out a frustrated breath. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, Marcus. I'm just trying to keep them from falling apart. But I'm not even sure I can do that. Hell, I'm falling apart." "I know," he said quietly. "But you're not alone in this. I'm here, even if I'm not physically there. You've got to trust that you're doing the best you can. You'll figure it out." I ran a hand through my hair, pacing across the kitchen. "I don't know what to do for them. They don't talk to me. I don't even know how to talk to them. I don't know how to fix this." "You don't have to fix it all at once. Take it one day at a time. They'll open up when they're ready. And you've got time. You don't have to solve everything today." I could hear the truth in his voice, but I still felt that pressure building in my chest. "I don't know if I'm enough for them, Marcus." "You are," he said, the certainty in his voice a stark contrast to the doubt gnawing at me. "You're all they've got right now, and you're doing better than you think." I didn't have a response to that. The silence stretched between us, and I could hear him breathing, probably just as exhausted as I felt. "I'll keep checking in," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "Just let me know what you need. I'm here. Always." "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks." We hung up, and I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, the emptiness in the room crawling into my bones. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending I had it together. The weight of the situation felt unbearable some days, and today was one of those days. I put the phone down and turned back to the table, where the kids were still sitting in silence, all of them waiting for me to make the next move. "You guys ready to get out of the house?" I asked, trying to sound more upbeat than I felt. No response. Ben was still staring out the window, Emma's arms were still crossed, and Chloe was absently turning the rabbit over in her hands. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Listen, we can go get some ice cream. Get out of here for a bit." Still nothing. I let out a frustrated breath and ran a hand over my face. "All right, fine. We'll stay in today, but we need to figure out a plan, all right? I can't do this alone." Ben's voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "I don't want to be here." I swallowed hard, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know how to respond. "I know," I said softly, "but we're going to make it work. I promise." Ben didn't respond, but I saw him shift slightly, just enough to show that he was listening, even if he wasn't ready to accept it. "I'm going to start working on a plan for school," I said, grabbing my phone and pulling up the school district's website. "We'll get you all registered and settled in. One thing at a time." "Yeah," Emma muttered, still not meeting my eyes. "One thing at a time." I couldn't tell if she was agreeing with me or if she was just trying to get through the day. Chloe's voice broke the silence again, soft and small. "When will Mom come back?" I froze, my heart clenching. The same question had been haunting me since yesterday. I don't know, Chloe, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know when she'll come back. The silence in the room was deafening after that, and I could feel the weight of it crushing me. I'll make some calls, I said, trying to distract myself. I'll get things set up for you guys. We'll get through it, okay? They nodded, each of them still lost in their own world, and I stood there, trying to breathe, trying to figure out how to keep going when I felt like I was already sinking. But I couldn't stop. Not for them. Not yet. I spent the rest of the afternoon making calls, handling what little I could manage. I tried to reach Kendra, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Of course, I didn't expect her to answer, but a part of me still hoped she might. The more I tried to sort through the mess, the more it felt like I was just spinning in place. The kids were still in the living room, still barely speaking to each other or to me. Ben had taken to the couch, his phone always in his hand. Emma sat by the window, staring out, her face expressionless. Chloe was the only one who still looked at me, but her eyes seemed to be searching for something I couldn't give her. At some point, the phone rang again. I picked it up without checking the caller ID. Maybe it was Marcus, or maybe it was one of the many lawyers I'd been trying to reach all afternoon. Hello, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Alan? The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but it struck something inside me. Who is this? This is Jake, Kendra's ex. The name hit me like a punch in the gut. I hadn't heard from Jake in years, not since Kendra had left him. Well, not that I was keeping track of her failed relationships, but something about hearing his voice made my chest tighten. What do you want? I asked, a little more forcefully than I meant. I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear from me, he said, his voice slow, cautious. But I need to talk to you about Kendra. I felt the tension in my body spike. I didn't want to talk about Kendra. I didn't want to know anything more about her mess. But I also knew that if I didn't talk to him, I might be missing something crucial. What about her? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jake paused, and I could tell he was weighing his words. I don't know if she's told you anything about where she's been, but I know she's in trouble. Serious trouble. I swallowed, my mouth dry. What kind of trouble? He exhaled sharply. It's not my place to say everything, but she's with someone now. A guy who's not good news. And I think she's involved in something she shouldn't be. I felt a tight knot form in my stomach, but I didn't want to show it. What does this have to do with the kids? I'm trying to get them back, Alan. I'm trying to make sure they're safe. I don't know what Kendra's up to, but I don't trust her to make decisions for them. I've been calling around, trying to get legal help, but I'm just not in a good place myself. I thought maybe you'd. I cut him off. You think I'm just going to hand them over to you? My voice was cold, my patience thinning. You haven't even been a part of their lives. What? You think you're suddenly their hero? He sighed. I'm not trying to be a hero, Alan. I'm trying to do the right thing. But I don't think Kendra's going to come back for them. And if I don't do something, I don't know what'll happen to them. The silence hung heavy between us. I could hear the strain in his voice, but that didn't make me trust him any more than I already didn't. I'm doing what I can for them, I said finally, trying to keep my voice as steady as I could manage. You need to stay out of it. I've got them now. If you want to help, then stay the hell away. He didn't respond right away, and I could hear him breathing on the other end, as if he was trying to figure out what to say next. Okay, he said after a long pause, his tone softer now. Okay, I won't interfere, but you need to keep an eye on them, Alan. They've already been through too much. Just be careful. I hung up before he could say anything else. I didn't want to hear more of his half-baked excuses. I wasn't going to let him waltz back into their lives, not after everything Kendra had already put them through. The phone call left a bitter taste in my mouth, but it also left me feeling something else, worse than bitterness. It left me with the awful sense that I was, in fact, the one they needed, and I wasn't sure I could give them what they required. I turned back to the kids, who had been listening quietly from the table. Ben was still on his phone, but Emma was looking at me now, a mix of curiosity and something else in her eyes. You okay? She asked quietly, the first words she'd spoken to me all day. I nodded, though I didn't feel okay. Yeah, just a lot to handle. Yeah, she said, her voice distant. I guess. I sat down at the table across from them, my hands still shaking slightly. I'm not going to let anything happen to you guys. No matter what, I'm here for you. Chloe's wide eyes locked onto mine, her little hands gripping her rabbit even harder. When's Mommy coming back? I couldn't look at her. I just couldn't. I don't know, Chloe. But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Ben finally looked up from his phone, his gaze hard and steady. And what if she doesn't come back? What happens to us then? I didn't have an answer for him. Not a real one. I didn't know what would happen if Kendra didn't come back. Hell, I didn't even know how long I could keep this up. But I couldn't tell them that. Not yet. We'll figure it out, I said, though my voice wavered, and even I knew it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for them. It wasn't enough for me either. But it was all I had. I sat there in silence with them, all of us pretending we had more time than we did. We didn't. And deep down, I knew it. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. It was hard to know what to say next, harder still to find the energy to keep the act up. The kids were looking to me for something. Answers, reassurance, maybe even a reason to believe this was all going to work out. I had none of that to give. I glanced at the clock. It was late, and yet the day had felt endless. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. My parents. The fifth call today. I ignored it. Chloe shifted in her seat, her voice breaking the quiet. Can we watch a movie? I gave her a small smile, though I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. Sure, kiddo. Let's put something on. I grabbed the remote and flicked through the channels, but I wasn't really paying attention. I was thinking about the next few hours, about what tomorrow would look like. I kept telling myself we could do this, but every time I looked at them, Ben, Emma, Chloe, it felt like a lie. I wasn't the one they needed, and even if I tried to be, I was running out of steam. After a few minutes, the soft sounds of the movie filled the room, but it didn't make anything feel better. It just made it all more real. The phone buzzed again, more persistent this time. I didn't even bother to check it. I stood up and went to the kitchen, leaning against the counter for a moment, eyes closed. I hated that I was so exhausted. I hated that I felt like I was failing, and I hated how much I was relying on my phone to distract me from the sinking feeling in my chest. My phone rang again. This time, I answered. What? I couldn't help the sharpness in my voice. Alan. Marcus's voice was a welcome relief, even if it was tinged with concern. You good? I exhaled, leaning my forehead against the cool counter. No, not really. He paused. What happened? You sound off. I'm not handling it well, Marcus. I looked back toward the living room, where I could see their figures slumped against the couch, the weight of the night in their eyes. I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do. They need more than I can give. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I knew he was thinking, trying to find the right words. He always did that, paused, to give me the space to figure out how to put things into perspective, even if I didn't want to hear it. You're doing the best you can, he finally said, his voice softer now. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you are. You've got them, Alan. You're keeping them safe. You're making sure they eat, that they have somewhere to sleep. That's more than a lot of people would do. That doesn't feel like enough, I muttered, the frustration building. They're looking to me for something, and I'm barely keeping it together. I don't know what to say to them. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, Marcus said quietly. You can't fix them, or what Kendra's done. But you're here, and that's enough for now. I pressed my palm against my forehead. I don't feel like it's enough. Not when they're asking about her, when they're asking why she's not here. Don't make promises you can't keep, he said, and I could hear the sincerity in his voice. It's going to take time, and you've got to take care of yourself too. You can't be their everything if you're falling apart yourself. I didn't have a response to that. The truth stung, but I knew he was right. I wasn't okay, but I had to keep pretending to be. Just take a breath, okay? Let me know what I can do. I'm here for you, Alan. I couldn't speak for a moment, just standing there, the weight of everything crashing over me again. Thanks, I said finally. I don't know how to get through this. You will, Marcus replied. One day at a time. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. Yeah, one day at a time. We hung up, and I stood there for a moment longer, breathing deeply, trying to steady myself. I turned back to the living room, but the words were already in the air, hanging between us. They needed me to be the answer to all of this, and I wasn't. I walked back into the room, hearing the sounds of the movie still playing. Ben and Emma hadn't moved, but Chloe looked up when I stepped in, her eyes wide, full of questions that I couldn't answer. Do you want to talk? I asked, though it felt like a pointless question. Chloe shook her head, but she reached out, grabbing my hand. Are you going to be okay? she asked, her voice small. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Yeah, I'll be okay. The words felt empty even as I said them, but I had to say them. For her. For all of them. I sat down beside her, feeling the weight of the moment pressed down on me. I couldn't promise everything would get better, but I could promise that I wouldn't leave them, not now. We'll get through this, I said, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. The silence settled around us again, but it wasn't as suffocating as it had been. For now, this was enough. And maybe that's all I could give them. Just enough to get by until tomorrow. For tonight, that would have to be enough.